Thanks, my friend and teacher. And I want to thank Adi, who's working the magic behind the scenes. And Valerie, thank you for your wonderful generosity and sensitivity as we lift up those who are suffering from intergenerational trauma and looking to support them in their journey of healing. Let's begin with a little bit of a reprise of our work up until now through practice. So I want to invite you to settle a little bit and get comfortable. And your eyes can be open and downcast or closed, whichever will resource you today and help you to feel safe and supported in your own inner being. And little by little, we can relax and settle into our Merkava, into our chariot, into the body. Perhaps take a couple of deep breaths all the way down into the abdomen and then releasing fully on the out breath. With each in breath, we can infuse the body with consciousness, and with each out breath, we can relax a little bit more into our seat. And we can return into the work of engraving this prayer phrase into our psyche and into our nervous system. Rokaha Aretz al Hamayim. Blessed is the one who spreads solid ground upon the waters. And as we repeat this phrase in the mind, this prayer mantra, again and again, slowly, intentionally, with the fullness of our presence, we also become aware of the earth holding us, supporting us, sustaining us. We relax more deeply into her as she reaches up to support us and hold us. And as we feel the body becoming more suffused with consciousness, with light, we can then journey up into the world of Yetzira, the world of heart formation. Noticing whatever emotions are present here and now, suffusing our emotional life with consciousness, with awareness. And we can breathe into whatever emotions may be here. Relaxing our awareness into our emotional life. And as we do, we can then bring the prayer mantra to mind. Kol haneshama tehalel. My distillation in English, every breath a prayer. Focusing on each word with intention, with presence. As we incline the heart toward experiencing the in-breath as a gift given freely by the whole universe, an expression of divine love. And as we breathe out, inclining the heart toward awe, reverence, perhaps even some measure of holy fear. As we recognize that part of the pulsation of being is not only the arising and coming into being as an expression of love, but also the passing away as an expression of divine contraction. And as we do this, we notice what happens at the heart level. And we notice what response the heart may naturally fall into when we invite the heart to rest in the marinade of love and awe. So when you're ready, you can leave that be. Maybe rub your fingers together a little bit or rub your hands on your legs. Maybe stretch a little bit and then you can open your eyes if they've been closed. And I just want to affirm that even as this series has been concept rich, right, what's key is our experience and our ability to actually use the Kabbalistic map of the four worlds to suffuse each dimension of our being with spirit and actually traverse the map ourselves through our inward journey. So today we're going to turn to the next world. Of course, as I said yesterday, we transcend and include, right? We never leave the previous worlds behind. We don't leave the body behind when we turn to the world of the heart. And we don't leave the body or the heart behind when we turn to the world of Bria, the world of the spiritual mind. So let me just pull up that map once again. And we'll take a look at a brief snippet of text to ground our practice today. Here, once again, is our chart of the four worlds. Focusing on the left-hand column here. And we just rested in the world of Asiya, where we establish our Merkava, our chariot, the vessel for consciousness to permeate our entire being, right, and become more manifest and radiant and expansive. And then from there, we enter into the world of Yetzirah, right, the world of the heart, or emotional consciousness. And whereas in the world of Asiya, we kind of cultivate a sense of surrender to what is, right? to the divine whole and the way in which it is trying to manifest in this moment in our lives. In the world of Yetzirah, we cultivate thoughts of love and awe, allowing the heart to open to a vaster spiritual heart quality. And today we're turning to the world of Bria, or cognitive consciousness, right? And the goal here is really to suffuse the mind itself, the thinking mind, right, with spirit, with consciousness. And we're going to be doing that by focusing on Shema and its blessings. And notice that even in this dimension, right, we're still operating in the domain of the small self, right? The ego self. Right? There's still a sense of being a separate entity. But the edges and boundaries of that self are beginning to soften a little bit. Right? And the self is becoming a little bit more transparent. So to help us with the work of entering the world of Bria, we're going to look at this very small snippet of text again, once again, from Yama Chochma, this book, The Sea of Wisdom, by Rabbi Yitzchak Morgenstern, from his treatise on non-dual practice. And we're still in the fourth gate here, the feeling of rising through the worlds. And he teaches, then we ascend from the world of Yetzirah, which is to say the world of the heart, by contemplating and engraving holy concepts into the mind. Remember, he offered us these two practices of engraving chakika, right, where we come back to a prayer mantra again and again and again and again and again, right? And we engrave it into the psyche, into the fabric of our being through that repetition and intense focus. And simultaneously, we contemplate the inner meaning of the words, right? What they're pointing to experientially and spiritually. And so we enter the world of Bria, the world of the mind, by contemplating and engraving holy concepts, right? The mind likes concepts. So as it were, we give it a job to do, but instead of focusing on mundane concepts, right, we now focus on sacred or holy concepts. For example, the idea of divinity surrounding and filling all worlds. So this is a classical teaching from the Kabbalah that the divine both encircles or embraces or surrounds or transcends all dimensions of reality, and also suffuses or penetrates or permeates all dimensions of reality. So we actually begin to contemplate that concept, right? That there's some spiritual reality that is way bigger than the physical world, right? And surrounds it. And also permeates every nook and cranny of the world that we're familiar with, as well as all other dimensions of being. And if we keep doing that, and focusing in that way and contemplating in that way, he says, then we begin to feel the pleasant light contained therein, which is to say the light contained in the world of the mind. Suddenly the mind becomes suffused with light, right? With consciousness. I used the metaphor the other day of mists, right? And at first maybe the light feels a little dim, but little by little you get saturated, or the mind gets saturated in this kind of beautiful radiant consciousness. And the light we feel is the light of delight, the blissful light of chokhmah, the wisdom mind, right, of pure spirit, now coming down into the rational analytical mind, the thinking mind, within the spiritual world of Bria, right? The world of the mind suffused with consciousness. Right? Because usually, the mind is just kind of wandering hither and yon, and it's caught up in cycles of grasping and aversion that are very deeply connected with our emotional reactivity, right? But when we begin to contemplate these kinds of holy concepts and really fix our attention on them in meditative prayer, the mind can be released from those habitual tendencies and instead open to its own radiance, right, as it becomes suffused with consciousness. And then the mind begins to feel more open, spacious, and delightful. So don't take my word for it. We're going to check it out in the laboratory of our own experience. But what I'd like to do today is front load a little bit around the prayer and meditation practice so that we can spend the first 10 minutes in silence. Right? And then in the last 10 minutes, I'll come back and hearken back to some of the things I'm going to share right now. So once again, the way that we do this practice in the world of Bria, right, is through prayer mantras that are lifted from or that are found within the Shema and its blessings section of the morning prayer, right? So I'm going to share my screen once again because I want to teach you a mystical orientation to the Shema that you may have learned elsewhere. Here are the words of the Shema, right? Shema Yisrael, Yod He Vav He Eloheinu, Yod He Vav He Echad. Listen deeply, O Israel. Yod He Vav He, right? The ground of being is our God. The ground of being is one, right? A singularity. I suspect most of us are familiar with the words. And then in a whisper and a hush, we say, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed, right? Blessed is the name of the majestic presence throughout all space and time is my poetic and mystical translation. So the Kabbalists call the first line of the Shema the Yichuda Ila'a, which means the higher unification, right? Where we're basically saying there is only God and nothing but God, right? There really is only one thing, and that is pure divinity. And using the metaphor that I hearkened back to a couple of times of the ocean and the wave, right? This quality of unification is where the ocean gets absorbed back into the wave. And there is where the wave gets absorbed back into the ocean and there's no more wave any longer. There's just ocean, right? A singular and coherent ocean. And when it comes to the second line, right, blessed is the name of the majestic presence throughout all space and time. This is called the Yichuda Tatar, or the lower unification in Kabbalah, right? And it refers to the awareness now that even as the wave retains its individual identity, the ocean is present within the wave, right? So as we come back to Shema as the foundation for our chakika, or engraving and hitbonenut and contemplation practice, right? I'm going to be offering some guidance so that we can begin to experience the Shema and the Baruch Shem in this way, right? But first, what I want to invite you to do is to spend the first 10 minutes in silence, and I'm not going to offer much guidance, doing the work that we've done over the last couple of days and that we did a reprise of when we started today, around first really getting established in the world of Asiya and settling into your Merkava, your embodied chariot, creating that divine vessel of embodied awareness. And then working your way, when you feel that the body is suffused with light, right, with spiritual light, working your way into the dimension of the heart and cultivating love and awe. And you can use, if you'd like, the prayer nuggets that we dispensed in the sheets, and I'll put those in the chat in just a minute, right? Or you can kind of riff and go off in your own direction, right? And then I'll pick up with kind of transitioning us into the world of Bria. Okay? Everyone clear? Give me a thumbs up if you're clear, right? Of course, I'm not going to be able to see all 259 people, right? But if you have a particular question about the mechanics of practice, you can put it in the chat. So we'll get started. And again, I'm just going to leave about 10 minutes in silence. And I'll put those prayer mantras in the chat as well, okay? So let's get established in our Merkava. Again, settling into our meditative posture and beginning to suffuse the body with consciousness. Choose whichever anchor is sustaining for you. Sensations of contact with the chair or the floor, or the rising and falling of your breath or sounds. And when you're ready, turn to the prayer mantras and begin to engrave them into your mind. I invite you, when you're ready, to move the locus of your attention up into the mind. We don't leave our embodied awareness behind. There's still a sense of the body here now, suffused with consciousness. Surrendering fully to the moment. Giving into gravity. And there's still a strong sense of love and awe in the heart. And even as you bring these levels of your being along for the ride into the world of the mind, I want to invite you first to just notice what's present in the mind, what thoughts are moving through the mind, if any, what images are floating through the mind. We begin just with mindfulness, locating ourselves in the world of Bria, the world of the mind. We meet the thoughts with loving acceptance, with non-judgment. This is what the mind does. It spins thoughts. And we can witness them rather than being swept into the current. And even just that process of watching our thoughts will allow the mind to become more suffused with consciousness, more radiant, more glowing, more open. But now, what I want to invite you to do is to begin to either recite in a hush or even silently in your own mind the words of the Shema, just the first phrase. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, or listen deeply, and you can even address yourself by name as an Israelite. Listen, listen deeply, O Sam, O Barbara, O Mark, O Adi. The ground of being, our God. The ground of being is one, a singularity, a totality. As you continue to recite that mantra, see if you can simultaneously contemplate and see in your mind's eye a vast, limitless field of pure light. And every time you get to the word echad, see if you can imagine yourself merging with the light, being completely absorbed into it. And just notice what happens in the mind when you do that. You can keep going with that if you'd like. You could also turn to the lower unification. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. The name of your glorious presence is felt throughout all space and time. There's no nook or cranny devoid of the divine presence of this beautiful, radiant consciousness and love. You can imagine yourself as you recite those words, taking shape once again as an individual, separate being. Then imagine a ray of light coming down from that limitless source and permeating your entire mind, heart, and body, every cell, every nook and cranny. And notice what happens in the mind as you do that. And if you'd like, this is really just an invitation. You can start to alternate between the two, right? Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, merging with the infinite light on the word Echad. And then as you say, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed, either in speech or in thought, imagining a ray of that light coming down into you and filling every dimension of your being. We're still operating here on the level of the mind, so there's still an ego. There's still a sense of separate selfhood, but maybe its edges have become a little bit more blurred. Maybe the body, heart, and mind are so suffused with consciousness that it's even hard to tell exactly where the boundaries between self and world are. And our whole being is permeated with consciousness. Elevates the nervous system, the heart, the mind. and makes it more transparent, more spacious, more expansive. So I want you to leave that now and travel back into the heart. Maybe even giving yourself a little heart massage. Placing your hands on your heart or a hand on the heart. And then when you're ready, come back down into the Merkava, into the chariot of the body, making contact with the earth. Maybe with your hands, touch your legs, or have your hands touch one another. And when you're ready, if your eyes have been closed, you can open them as we turn to Mourner's Kaddish.
Thank you so much, Sam. And friends, we seal the practice as we do each day with an opportunity for those in mourning or observing yard sites to recite the Mourner's Kaddish. If you'd like, you can share the name or names of any of those you're holding in your heart today in the chat box, either now or after we recite Kaddish. For those who are not reciting Kaddish, practice is to simply be present for those who are, to bear witness, compassionate, be attentive, presence for those in mourning who are invited to rise with me in body or in spirit to recite Kaddish together. Yitgadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah,
Amen.
Bi'alma, Dibra, Chirute, Bi'amlich, Malchute, B'chayechon, Bi'amechon, Uchaye, B'chol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala, Bizman Karib, Mimru, Amen.
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 Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevarach, Le'olam, Amen, Almaya.
Maya.
Barach, Yishtabach, Yitrama, Yitnase, Yithadar, Yitale, Yitalal, Shmei Kusha, Briku, La'ela, Mikol, Birchata, B'shirata, Tushbachata, V'nekamata, Da'amiran, Ba'alma, Imru, Amen.
Amen.
Yehi Shlama Rabba, Kim Shmaya, Chayim, Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Imru, Amen. Yaseh Shalom Biromam, Uyaseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Yisrael, Ve'al Kol Yoshvei Yisrael, Imru, Amen.
Amen.
Friends, thanks for joining us for today's session here on the last day of the month of Cheshvan. Thanks to our teacher, beautiful teaching today, as always, by Rabbi Sam Feinsmith. You're welcome to stay on for a conversation and questions with Sam about the practice and the teaching. If you're leaving us, we hope you'll join us tomorrow for the concluding session in this series and to sit into Shabbat on Rosh Chodesh Kislev together tomorrow at the same time. Thanks to Valerie Taylor for supporting and sponsoring our week of practice of meditation as prayer. And thanks so much to, as always, to Adi Stein, as Sam said, for making it look easy and holding this space for us so beautifully. If you have a question you'd like to put to Sam, please put it in the chat box. We'll keep an eye on that. We have a double, this is like an old-fashioned double header, just a reminder for those who are leaving that we've got Torah study coming up at 2:00 here on WIJS, 2 p.m. Eastern. There'll be a half-hour break, and we hope you'll join us to learn Torah together with Aaron Leaf Smokler. Beautiful, Sam. Thank you. That was really, really special. Lots of questions. I have a lot of questions. I'm looking for the questions in the chat box. First is kind of an observation, Sam, which came to me, and sometimes I notice this, that that what you were offering today, where in this case the ego doesn't completely disappear, but as you were describing it, the edges become blurred, and we have like a flicker of of the, of being the wave that dissolves into the ocean, right? And it strikes me that, sometimes it strikes me that we all have, every human being has a body memory of that, where we know that, it's in that tradition that, before we're born, we know the whole Torah and we forget it. And the angel touches us here, but it's represented by, psychologically that in utero and after we're born, there really is no ego. There's no there's no dualism. There's just ascent until there is that developmental change where the infant becomes aware of being a separate being. There is a period of time, I'm not sure how long it is, where that's all we know, right? So I just wanted to throw that out. I don't know, does that resonate with you? That we all know that, we've lived it in some way. Let me put it into the form of a question. Do you think that's the form of consciousness that you're describing?
We're not there yet, although some people may have dropped into a non-dual state through this practice, because sometimes when we do this practice, the mind can sort of naturally settle back into its source and fall into a non-dual state. But yeah, it's like that, except, it's different to be able to intentionally cultivate the ability to fall into a non-dual state than it is to, be an infant and be in that state.
I guess I'm thinking that it's almost like, it's the wave before it becomes the wave, before it realizes or thinks of itself as a wave, that we have the capacity for it. I'm not saying that we do it. I mean, I certainly don't do it. The other thought I had was that I can't remember exactly what you said, but it made me feel as though, we can kind of flick into a moment or a microsecond, right? And then we're out of it again, and then we're back into it, almost like, a pendulum swinging back and crossing this line. And I was wondering about that the goal is not to, as I understand it, at least, is not to get lost, not to have the goal of being in that non-dual state or feeling, totally lost in that, because we live in a dualistic world and we live in egos, we live in bodies, right?
Yeah. We're going to be exploring this question in greater detail tomorrow.
Okay.
We move into the world of Atzilut, which is a non-dual world and a world devoid of self. But you're 100% right in the sense that our goal is not to just disappear into a non-dual state and stay there forever. There are traditions where that is the goal. And there are sages and saints who, did basically do that. Ramana Maharshi comes to mind right now, one of the Vedanta masters of the 20th century. He would just be in a non-dual state for weeks and weeks and on end, and his students would actually have to feed him.
How did he pay the bills?
Well, he lived in India, right? So saints are taken care of there by the community. But, his students actually had to feed him to keep him alive during those times, because he basically escaped the body completely, right? And just merged with the divine. And had no sense that he was hungry. That's not the Hasidic approach. The Hasidic approach is, what we want to do is come back into the dualistic world and remain aware of the unity within the duality, right? So actually, even though Shema is called the higher unification, right, which is the recognition that there's only God and nothing but God, the Baruch Shem is the goal, right? We want to get to the lower unification, which is the ability to retain our individual identity, our individual sense of self, so we can operate in the world, right? And do the things we need to do in the world to make the world a better place, and so on and so forth, right? Because there's no doing when you're in a total non-dual state, right? There's no agent who can do anything.
Right.
So we want to stay in our dualistic state, but simultaneously retain a taste of, right, or a residue of non-dual consciousness, so that we can not be completely trapped in the world of duality.
So what, maybe say a word there about the Baruch Shem, and traditionally said in a whisper, in
Yeah.
in more liberal circles, it's said aloud along with the Shema, so you don't have to opine about that. But
Yeah.
what's the, in terms of as a prayer practice that can, where we can integrate that? You've lifted that up. So what might we do in that moment with the Baruch Shem Kavod?
Well, we've been doing it all week, in the
Mhm.
sense that, making consciousness manifest in the body, in the heart, in the mind, right? That's a practice in the lower unification, right? Because what we're essentially doing is we're bringing divinity down to earth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we can move in the body, right? And through our emotional life and relationships, and through our thinking mind, right? With the sense that we are simultaneously suffused with spirit, right? And that our whole being is suffused with spirit, which includes every domain of our being, penetrates every domain of our being, right? And simultaneously transcends every dimension of our being, right? So that we can be in the world, but not of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So we're going to stay tuned. There'll be more on this obviously tomorrow. I have a question that for you that I was going to ask you that would actually, I was a little concerned it might put you on the spot. So I'll tell you what it is.
Okay.
And it'll be for tomorrow, which is, we have been engaging in meditation as prayer practice, but I wanted to ask you personally, when you daven, when you pray, how this meditation practice comes into play for you. That is, how do you bring it to your prayer? Not now, not yet.
Tomorrow.
Maybe tomorrow. But let's see if there's time, maybe today. But I do want to address the questions that have come in. And I think if I'm getting the essence of some of these questions, like Mira, and the guided meditation, where you were using language about bringing light down and light surrounding us. And there's a question from Carol about why does a ray of light have to come down, or versus somehow enter otherwise. I guess I don't know. I'm guessing that behind those questions is this idea of whether this is external coming down. I mean, you have offered, for people who think about often using vertical metaphors, right, to bring something down versus from within.
Yep.
So maybe speak to that a little bit. Like, how do we, in an internal way, how do we understand, say, example, the rays of light coming towards us?
Yeah, that's great. That's a great question. So I'm hoping what we'll see tomorrow is that the source of that light is in us, right, in the deepest dimension of our being, as pure consciousness. So the light is always emanating from within.
By the way, when you were talking about, or I think it was yesterday or the day before, it's blurring, but when you talked about, I think Rakaha Arts al Hamayim, about the earth being settled over the waters, you spoke about the molten center of the earth also. I thought that was a beautiful way of also kind of reminding us, like we're so oriented outward and upward to redirect the attention inward and say, like, that's kind of amazing, really. This planet, right? Think of it as this solid rock, right? Actually, it's liquid inside.
And it's floating in midair, right? Yeah. It's all amazing. But look, the light is ultimately flowing from within. I don't want you to take my word for that. I want you to check it out for me. I want you to check it out for yourself, rather. Right. But on the level of the mind tends to get so trapped in its own kind of solipsisms and ignorance and craving and attachment, right? That we need something that could kind of penetrate into the mind, as it were, and kind of blow all of those constructs out of the water, right? And sometimes, at least for me, imagining that the light is coming from a higher transcendent source somehow outside of myself, right? And then kind of, permeating my mind can do that. It can really just kind of clear the mind of all of the clutter and the craving and the aversion and the obsessive kind of fixation, right, with protecting my small kind of narrow sense of selfhood. But again, we're operating here on the level of the mind, so we haven't reached the non-dual state of no self, right? We're working with concepts and images, which are still mental projections, right? They're not the thing itself. But what they do is they allow the mind to open enough that it can begin to fall into its natural state, right? As ayin, as totally empty and devoid of self, right? As innately radiant, pure, blissful, open, spacious, compassionate, and so on and so forth.
Right. So I just want to put a point on that's a working assumption, right? Which is, you beautifully say, that we have to test out our own experience, that you're describing the natural state of the mind, the uncluttered, unconfused, unstirred up, unagitated. I think going to the text, the distracting thoughts that arise, which this sounds like this is a process that you're describing for, quote, repairing those thoughts, or maybe, dissolving them in some way that reveals what's really, where they're really coming from, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It neutralizes them,
Mm-hmm.
right? It cuts through the kind of conditioning of the everyday thinking, egoic mind. And that's the difference between contemplation and thinking.
Yeah.
Right? You can think, you can think from now until the cows come home, and you'll never break through the mental constructs of the mind. But the practice of contemplation actually helps the mind to be liberated from those constructs.
Well, we're at time. I'm feeling a little apologetic because there are some questions in the chat we didn't get to, one of which was sent just to you, Sam, but I want to be respectful of our boundaries and end here. And as always, Sam, thank you so much for the clarity, the beauty of that teaching, and the beauty of the flow of the practice. Most of all, thanks to all of you for being here and engaging in with this and sticking your incredible devotion to this over time, and particularly this week. And thanks to Valerie for sponsoring us, and Adi for holding us together. Stay tuned, half an hour, new Zoom room for our Torah study with Aaron Leap-Smokler, and we hope to see you all tomorrow to sit into Shabbat together on Rosh Chodesh Kislev.